You didn't find the truth. You ended the possibilities. Most people think awakening is about discovery, as if truth was hiding somewhere, waiting for the right mind to stumble upon it. That's wrong. Truth isn't something you uncover. It's something you collapse into. And if you're listening to this, you're not here by accident. You're not part of the mass that drifts through reality half awake. You're one of the few whose awareness changes the system. You are not the observer. You are the collapse. Every time you notice something deeply, 1,000 other versions die quietly in the background. Every time you choose a meaning, infinite alternatives disappear. This isn't poetry. This is how reality works. And chosen ones don't awaken because they are special. They awaken because they are dangerous to possibility. Now listen carefully. You were taught that watching is neutral, that awareness is passive, that you can look at life without touching it. That's not wisdom. That's a comforting lie designed for people who don't want responsibility. Because the moment you observe something with intention, you interfere with it. Not emotionally, not symbolically, structurally. The instant your attention locks onto something, it stops being open-ended. It stops being fluid. It stops being one of many possible things. It becomes this, and everything else it could have been quietly disappears. This is how reality works, whether you like it or not. Think about it in simple terms. When you don't look at a situation closely, it stays ambiguous. It can mean different things to different people. It can go in multiple directions. But the moment you decide what it is, good or bad, right or wrong, real or fake, worth your time or not, the situation collapses into a single path. You didn't just understand it. You ended its flexibility. Most people don't realize this because their awareness is weak and scattered. They glance at life instead of seeing it. They drift instead of decide. Chosen ones are different. When you look at something, you finish it. That's why your presence feels heavy to certain people, not because you're intense, not because you're judgmental, but because your awareness removes their ability to stay undefined. Around you, things have to be real. Masks slip faster. Contradictions surface sooner. Excuses don't last long. People can sense when someone isn't just watching, but registering. And that's why environments shift when you enter a room. Conversations change tone. Energy tightens or sharpens. Silences become louder. You don't absorb the atmosphere. You organize it. Your mind doesn't just notice patterns, it forces patterns to commit. Most minds are passive receivers. They let information pass through without consequence. Yours doesn't. When you notice something, it sticks. When you understand something, it solidifies. When you recognize a truth, it becomes irreversible. This is why awakening doesn't feel light. It feels dense. You don't float through life anymore. You press into it. Chosen ones don't drift through chaos. They stabilize it. And stabilization always comes at a cost. Chaos holds infinite options. Order destroys them. That's the trade. When you bring clarity into a situation, you reduce possibility. When you bring definition, you remove alternatives. When you bring truth, you kill illusions. People like to talk about awareness as if it's harmless, as if seeing clearly is always good and gentle. It's not. Awareness is invasive. It enters systems that were comfortable in uncertainty and forces them to choose a shape. That's why some people feel exposed around you. Not attacked, exposed. They feel like they can't hide in half-beliefs or unfinished stories. They sense that if you look long enough, things will have to become real, and not everyone is ready for that. You don't need to say anything for this to happen. Your silence does it. Your attention does it. Because attention is not neutral. Attention is a decision-making force. Every time you decide what something is, you decide what it is not. Possibilities die the moment you decide what something is. That's the part most people refuse to accept. They want clarity without consequence, truth without loss, awakening without endings. That's impossible. Every insight closes doors. Every realization narrows the path. Every deep understanding removes futures that can no longer exist. This is why ignorance feels lighter. It keeps options alive. This is why overthinking isn't the real problem. Overdefining too early is. The quantum mind understands this intuitively. It knows that the act of knowing changes the thing being known. It knows that observation is participation. It knows that awareness is not separate from reality. It is embedded in it. That's why chosen ones learn restraint with their attention. They don't rush to label. They don't grab meaning too fast. They don't collapse reality before it's ready, because once something collapses, it doesn't expand again. You can't unknow what you've fully seen. You can't reopen possibilities you've decisively closed. That's why your path feels narrow compared to others. Not because you're limited, but because you're precise. Precision is expensive. It costs you comfort. It costs you innocence. It costs you easy belonging. But it gives you something most people never touch: alignment. And alignment only exists where uncertainty has been reduced. You are not here to observe life safely from a distance. You are here to interact with it at the level where things stop being vague. That's why your awareness feels heavy. It's not weight, it's finality. Most people chase awareness as if it's a reward, as if seeing more clearly will finally make life easier, lighter, calmer. That expectation is childish. Awareness is not a gift. It's a burden you earn the moment you stop lying to yourself. Before awareness, you can pretend. You can delay decisions. You can blame circumstances, people, timing, fate. After awareness, none of that works anymore. That's why awakening feels brutal instead of beautiful. The moment you truly become aware of something, you lose the ability to escape it. You can't unknow a pattern once you've seen it. You can't unsee a truth once it's registered. You can't go back to comfort once clarity has replaced illusion. This is where most people stop. They taste awareness, feel the pressure, and retreat. They call it overthinking. They call it burnout. They call it losing motivation. No, they call it those things because they don't want to admit the truth. Awareness removed their excuses. Awareness exposes where responsibility actually lies. Before awareness, suffering feels accidental. After awareness, suffering feels avoidable. And that's terrifying, because once you see clearly, you're no longer a victim of confusion. You're a participant in every choice you continue to make. Chosen ones don't wake up because they want power. They wake up because they can no longer tolerate unconsciousness. And that comes with a price. Awareness compresses life. When you don't know, you feel free because you haven't committed. When you know, your options shrink because some paths become dishonest. You can't pretend a toxic environment is not that bad once you see its pattern. You can't keep playing small once you see your own avoidance. You can't unlearn what your intuition has already confirmed. That's why awareness feels like pressure instead of peace. Pressure is the sensation of responsibility becoming unavoidable. This is also why chosen ones feel older than their age. Not because of trauma, not because of suffering alone, but because awareness accelerates psychological time. You live fewer lives once you wake up. You don't get to try everything. You don't get to explore every version of yourself. Most people live wide and shallow. Chosen ones live narrow and deep. And depth demands awareness. Here's the part most people don't want to hear. Awareness doesn't just reveal truth. It removes permission. Once you're aware, you lose permission to stay the same. You can still choose to stay the same, but you'll feel the friction, you'll feel the internal resistance, you'll feel the quiet self-betrayal. That's why awareness without courage feels unbearable. People don't suffer because they don't know. They suffer because they know and refuse to act. That tension is not confusion. It's internal conflict. The quantum mind understands this instinctively. It knows that information is not neutral. Information collapses timelines. Once you know, some futures disappear. Once you see, some choices become impossible to justify. That's why awareness narrows your world before it strengthens it. You don't feel empowered at first. You feel exposed to your own patterns, exposed to your delays, exposed to the ways you've been negotiating with yourself. This is why awareness feels lonely, not because others leave you, but because fewer people can meet you at that level of honesty. Most conversations are built on ambiguity. Most relationships survive on selective blindness. Most systems depend on people not seeing too much. When you become aware, you disrupt that balance. You stop participating in comfortable illusions. You stop reinforcing false narratives. You stop pretending things don't matter when they clearly do. That's why some people distance themselves from you without explanation. Not because you changed who you are, but because awareness changed what you tolerate. Awareness is not softness. It is sharpness. It cuts through rationalizations. It cuts through emotional noise. It cuts through self-deception. And sharp things are dangerous in unsteady hands. That's why awakening doesn't happen all at once. If it did, it would crush most people. Chosen ones don't awaken because they are stronger by default. They awaken because they are willing to carry the weight of knowing. They accept that once awareness arrives, there is no refund, no return to innocence, no retreat into ignorance, no pretending you didn't notice. You don't gain peace immediately. You gain truth first, and truth is heavy. Peace only comes later, when your actions finally align with what you already know. Until then, awareness feels like pressure, like being watched by your own conscience, like being unable to hide from yourself. That's not a curse. That's the price of clarity. And only those meant to walk this path are willing to pay it. Most people believe identity is something you discover, as if who you are is hidden somewhere inside you, waiting to be found. That belief is comforting. And completely wrong. Identity is not discovered. It is collapsed. You don't find who you are. You decide who you are. And in doing so, you destroy every version you are not. That's why identity formation hurts. Every time you say, "This is me," you are saying, "This is not." Every time you commit to a value, a direction, a standard, or a truth, you erase alternatives. Most people avoid strong identity for this exact reason. They want to keep doors open. They want to remain flexible. They want to preserve the fantasy that they could be anything, anytime. But possibility without commitment is just avoidance. Chosen ones feel this tension early. They feel the discomfort of being undefined. They feel the pressure to choose when others are still drifting. Albeit they feel the internal demand for alignment long before society expects it. And that pressure is not coming from the outside. It's coming from awareness. Identity is what happens when awareness stops tolerating contradiction. As long as you are unconscious, you can live as multiple people at once. You can believe one thing and act another way. You can value truth but avoid honesty. You can want growth and still cling to comfort. Awareness makes that impossible. Once you see your inconsistencies, they stop being invisible. Once you recognize your patterns, they stop being accidental. Once you understand yourself, pretending becomes exhausting. That's when identity begins to collapse. Not into confusion, into coherence. This is why growth feels like loss. People talk about becoming more, but the truth is harsher. You become less, more precisely defined. You lose versions of yourself that were built on indecision. You lose personalities that only existed to please others. You lose paths that depended on not knowing who you were. That's not expansion. That's elimination. And elimination is violent to the ego. The ego thrives on optionality. It wants backup plans. It wants escape routes. It wants to believe it can reverse decisions without consequence. Identity removes that illusion. Once you collapse into a clear self, you can no longer pretend to be everything. That's why chosen ones feel grief during growth. Not because they are failing, but because they are closing timelines. Every strong identity comes with ghosts. Versions of yourself that will never exist. The artist you didn't become. The relationship you outgrew. On the life you could have lived if you stayed unaware. Most people numb this grief by staying vague. They avoid firm stances. They avoid deep commitments. They avoid saying, "This is who I am," with conviction. Vagueness keeps possibilities alive, but it also keeps power dormant. The quantum mind understands this instinctively. It knows that identity is not additive. It is selective. You don't gain strength by stacking traits. You gain strength by removing contradictions. That's why clarity feels restrictive at first. Suddenly, not everything fits anymore. Not everyone aligns with you anymore. Not every environment tolerates you anymore. That's not a mistake. That's identity doing its job. Chosen ones are not meant to be adaptable in every room. They are meant to be consistent across rooms. Consistency requires collapse, and collapse requires courage. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The more aware you become, the harder it is to live a fragmented life. You can't be one person alone and another in public. You can't think deeply and act shallowly without internal tension. You can't see your own potential and continue to avoid it without self-contempt. This is why identity pressure increases after awakening. It's not external expectation. It's internal coherence demanding alignment. You start feeling an invisible standard watching you, not judging, demanding honesty. That's not anxiety, that's identity forming. And identity formation always comes with narrowing. Your choices reduce, your tolerance for nonsense drops, your patience for misalignment disappears. That's why your life may feel smaller after awakening. Fewer people, fewer paths, or fewer distractions. But what remains is real. Most people trade authenticity for comfort. Chosen ones trade comfort for integrity. And integrity requires collapse. You don't get to keep every version of yourself. You don't get to live every life. You don't get infinite retreats. Awareness forces commitment, and commitment forces identity. This is why awakening doesn't feel like freedom at first. Freedom without identity is chaos. Identity without collapse is fantasy. True freedom comes later. After you stop trying to be everything, after you accept that becoming one thing fully is more powerful than becoming many things partially, You are not losing yourself as you grow. You are finalizing yourself. And finalized things have weight. They affect reality. They influence others. They can't be ignored. That's why chosen ones feel heavier as they become clearer. Not burdened, defined. And definition is the moment possibility ends and power begins. Most people are terrified of confusion. They treat not knowing as failure, as immaturity, as something to fix as quickly as possible. So they rush, they grab explanations, they borrow beliefs, they cling to labels that make them feel stable. And in doing so, they destroy something extremely valuable: possibility. Confusion is not the absence of intelligence. It is intelligence refusing to collapse too early. Before clarity arrives, there is a phase where multiple interpretations coexist. Multiple futures remain alive. Multiple meanings are still possible. That phase is uncomfortable, and that discomfort is what most people can't tolerate. So they end it prematurely. They choose certainty not because it's true, but because it's calming. Chosen ones feel this pressure too, but they don't obey it. They understand something most people never learn. Uncertainty is not chaos, it is raw potential. The moment you rush to an answer, you don't gain truth, you gain closure. And closure feels good, but it's expensive. Because every conclusion is a collapse event. Once you decide what something means, you stop exploring what else it could be. Once you label an experience, you stop listening to it. Once you explain something away, you stop learning from it. This is why premature certainty creates shallow minds. People who know too quickly rarely understand deeply. They mistake familiarity for truth. They confuse repetition with insight. They confuse confidence with accuracy. And the quantum mind does the opposite. It delays collapse. It stays inside ambiguity longer than is comfortable. It resists the urge to simplify too fast. It lets tension exist without resolving it immediately. Not because it's confused, but because it respects the cost of resolution. Think about this carefully. Every major mistake in life usually comes from false certainty, not confusion. Wrong relationships begin with, "I'm sure about this." Wrong beliefs begin with, "This explains everything." Wrong paths begin with, "This feels right, so I won't question it." Confusion didn't cause those errors. Certainty did. Chosen ones learn to distrust clarity that arrives too easily. They ask different questions. Why does this answer feel relieving? What discomfort did it remove? What possibilities did it quietly erase? Because the most dangerous answers are the ones that stop inquiry. Confusion keeps inquiry alive. That's why confusion feels unstable. It doesn't give you a place to stand. It doesn't give you an identity to hide behind. It doesn't give you a narrative to repeat. It keeps you exposed, and exposure is uncomfortable. But exposure is also where real understanding forms. This is why awakening often begins with confusion instead of enlightenment. Your old explanations stop working. Your borrowed beliefs start cracking. Your familiar narratives lose their grip. You feel lost, not because you're regressing, but because you're no longer lying to yourself. Most people panic at this stage. They rush back to certainty. They grab a doctrine. They adopt a system. They let someone else think for them. Chosen ones don't. They stay. They let confusion sharpen their perception. They let uncertainty refine their questions. They let discomfort teach them patience. Because they understand something crucial. Clarity that survives confusion is real. Clarity that avoids confusion is fragile. The longer a truth can exist without collapsing prematurely, The stronger it becomes when it finally does. That's why your mind feels stretched during this phase. You're holding multiple possibilities without choosing one. You're resisting the urge to simplify. You're allowing complexity to exist. That's not weakness. That's discipline. And discipline is what separates deep minds from reactive ones. Here's the part that most people won't like. Confusion feels like freedom at first, then like danger. Why? Because confusion removes the illusion of control. You can't predict outcomes easily. You can't explain yourself cleanly. You can't reassure others with certainty. And people don't like that. They will pressure you to decide. They will ask you to define yourself. They will try to force clarity out of you. Not because they care about your growth, but because your uncertainty unsettles them. Your uncollapsed state reminds them of their own avoided questions. So they push. Chosen ones resist that pressure. They don't collapse their reality to make others comfortable. They understand that once collapse happens, there is no undo. You can't go back to not knowing. You can't reopen paths you closed prematurely. You can't revive possibilities you killed to feel safe. That's why patience with confusion is a form of intelligence. It's the ability to tolerate tension without escaping into answers. Most people escape. Chosen ones endure. And because they endure, when clarity finally arrives, it is not borrowed. It is earned. It doesn't feel loud or dramatic. It feels quiet, solid, unshakable. Because it survived uncertainty. You are not lost when you are confused. You are between collapses. And that space, unstable, uncomfortable, undefined, is where real power is formed. Rush out of it, and you become certain but shallow. Stay inside it long enough, and when reality finally commits, it commits in your favor. Most people believe influence requires effort. They think you have to speak louder, explain yourself better, persuade harder, or perform in some visible way to affect others. That belief comes from weak awareness. Real influence does not come from action. It comes from presence that collapses ambiguity. You change people without touching them because your awareness does something most people's awareness does not. It removes hiding places. Around you, things cannot remain half-formed for long. Thoughts start to organize themselves. Emotions surface without being invited. Contradictions become uncomfortable to maintain. You are not pushing anything onto anyone. You are simply refusing to participate in vagueness. And that refusal alone is disruptive. This is why people react to you in extreme ways. Some feel drawn, grounded, and strangely calm around you. Others feel tense, exposed, and restless without knowing why. The difference has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with what your presence forces them to face. Most human interaction runs on unspoken agreements to not look too closely. People tolerate each other by avoiding precision. They survive relationships by ignoring inconsistencies. They maintain peace by leaving things undefined. You break those agreements without saying a word. Your attention sharpens the room. Your silence demands coherence. Your calm removes noise. People sense that around you, pretending takes more energy than honesty. And most people are not prepared for that. This is why conversations change when you enter. Not because you dominate them, but because they can no longer drift. Topics become more serious. Jokes lose their edge. Small talk collapses faster. It feels like pressure to those who live unconsciously. It feels like relief to those who are exhausted by pretending. You don't mirror people back to themselves. You stabilize what was previously unstable. And stabilization is not neutral. When someone is forced to stabilize internally, they must choose which version of themselves to inhabit. They must either rise into coherence or retreat into avoidance. This is why some people suddenly pull away from you. They do not leave because you harmed them. They leave because staying would require adjustment. Your presence silently asks questions they don't want to answer. What am I doing with my life? Why am I still here? What am I avoiding? Who am I pretending to be? You never asked those questions. Your awareness did. Chosen ones often misinterpret this dynamic. They think they are too intense. They think they are socially broken. They think something about them repels people. That is a misunderstanding. You're not repelling people. You're filtering them. People who need ambiguity to survive will feel threatened by clarity. People who rely on distraction will feel exposed by stillness. People who benefit from confusion will feel destabilized by presence. None of that is your responsibility. This is also why your relationships feel fewer but deeper. You cannot maintain wide, shallow connections when your awareness collapses nonsense quickly. You do not have the patience for performance-based bonds. You do not have the tolerance for relationships that survive on avoidance. So quantity drops, depth increases, and depth demands honesty. Most people say they want honesty, but what they actually want is reassurance. They want validation without confrontation. They want connection without consequence. Your presence does not offer that. It offers reality. That is why being around you feels different, even when you say very little. People feel seen without being analyzed. They feel measured without being judged. They feel understood without being rescued. That combination is rare and unsettling. Some will lean into it and grow. Others will recoil and disappear. Neither outcome requires you to change. Here is the part that matters. You must stop trying to soften your presence to make others comfortable. Every time you dim your awareness, you betray your function. Every time you pretend not to notice what you clearly see, you fracture yourself. Every time you play smaller to preserve someone else's illusion, you lose coherence. You are not here to maintain emotional equilibrium for others. You are here to stabilize reality where you stand. That does not mean being harsh. It means being exact. Exactness is not cruelty. It is integrity. Chosen ones do not need to correct others. They do not need to convince anyone. They do not need to announce truths. Their presence does the work. Because presence that is aligned cannot avoid impact. Even when you are silent, even when you are still, even when you are doing nothing, you are not influencing people accidentally. You are influencing them inevitably. And the more coherent you become, the stronger that effect grows. This is why solitude becomes necessary at certain stages. Not because you dislike people, but because constant interaction collapses too many realities too fast. You need space to remain uncollapsed yourself, to integrate, to stabilize internally, and to decide which realities you are willing to finalize. Understand this clearly. You are not meant to blend into environments. You are meant to resolve them. And resolution always changes those who are present. Some will thank you for it. Some will resent you for it. Most will never understand why they felt different around you. That is not your burden. Your only responsibility is to remain aligned with what you see. Because the moment you stop trusting your awareness, you lose the very thing that makes you who you are. You do not need to touch anyone to change them. Your awareness already has. If your life feels like it pushes back against you more than it does against others, that is not a coincidence, and it is not bad luck. It is resistance to collapse. Most systems prefer ambiguity. Ambiguity keeps things flexible. Ambiguity allows delay. Ambiguity postpones consequences. When nothing is clearly defined, nothing has to be resolved. You do not function that way. Your awareness does not tolerate loose ends for long. Your presence demands decisions. Your thinking forces conclusions. That alone makes you incompatible with many systems. Workplaces are built on managed confusion. Social structures survive on unspoken compromises. Relationships often exist because no one asks the final question. You ask it without speaking. That is why reality tightens around you. Doors do not open easily. Paths demand proof. Outcomes require effort. Not because the universe is testing you, because you threaten indecision. When you walk into a system, it can no longer stay unresolved. It must either align or reject you. There is no neutral option. This is why your progress often feels slower but more permanent. You do not glide through opportunities. You compress them. You force situations to reveal whether they are real or performative. You force people to show whether they are aligned or opportunistic. You force paths to prove whether they are sustainable or illusory. Most people advance quickly because they accept ambiguity. They say yes without clarity. They commit without alignment. They move forward without understanding the cost. You do not. You hesitate when something feels incoherent. You slow down when details do not add up. You resist momentum that is not grounded in truth. That hesitation is often mistaken for fear. It is not fear. It is refusal to collapse into the wrong reality. This is why your life feels intense, even when nothing dramatic is happening. Your internal system is always resolving. You are constantly aligning values with actions, thoughts with consequences, vision with reality. That internal work creates friction with a world that prefers surface-level movement. Here is the part that most people misunderstand. Resistance is not opposition. It is pressure created by incompatibility. Reality does not fight you. It responds to you. When your clarity enters a vague environment, tension forms. When your precision enters a sloppy system, friction increases. When your depth enters a shallow structure, instability appears. That instability is not your fault. It is exposure. This is why chosen ones are often misunderstood as difficult, intense, or uncompromising. Not because they are aggressive, but because they do not allow things to remain undefined. They do not tolerate half commitments. They do not accept vague promises. They do not operate well inside systems that survive on pretending. The world pushes back because it cannot absorb you without changing. And most systems resist change. This is also why your breakthroughs tend to arrive suddenly instead of gradually. Long periods of resistance, then decisive shifts. Collapse works that way. Pressure builds quietly until ambiguity can no longer hold. Then reality commits. A job ends abruptly. A relationship clarifies instantly. A direction becomes undeniable overnight. To others, it looks sudden. To you, it feels overdue. Because you felt the instability long before the collapse occurred. You sensed it when others were still comfortable. You noticed cracks while others enjoyed the illusion. That is not pessimism. That is sensitivity to structure. Here is something you need to hear clearly. You are not meant to fit smoothly into the world as it is. You are meant to force it to finalize. That does not mean fixing it. It means confronting it with coherence. Some environments will refine themselves around you. Others will expel you. Both outcomes are correct. Staying where you dilute yourself is not stability. It is self-erasure. chosen ones are not rewarded for blending in. They are shaped by resistance. Resistance sharpens your discernment. Resistance strengthens your boundaries. Resistance teaches you where not to invest your awareness. If everything welcomed you easily, you would never know where you actually belong. Ease without alignment is deception. Difficulty with meaning is refinement. This is why your path feels lonely at times. Not because you are unsupported, but because few people are willing to live at the level where things must resolve. Most people want movement without consequence. You demand consequence before movement. That reverses the order, and that reversal creates friction everywhere you go. Do not mistake that friction for failure. It is evidence that your awareness is doing its job. You are not here to float through systems untouched. You are here to pressure test reality, to reveal what holds, to expose what collapses, to finalize what has been postponed too long. The world resists you because you do not allow it to stay unfinished, and unfinished things always fight clarity. Stay steady. Resistance is not a sign to retreat. It is a signal that something is about to resolve. And when it does, it will not be partial. It will be final. Most people imagine awakening as a doorway opening, a new chapter starting, a higher level unlocked. That fantasy is why so many people misunderstand what is happening to them. Awakening is not an expansion forward. It is a closure behind you. It is not the moment you gain access to more realities. It is the moment you lose access to the ones built on unconsciousness. Before awakening, life feels wide. You can drift. You can experiment without consequence. You can live inside contradictions without feeling the tension. After awakening, that openness disappears. Not because life becomes smaller, but because you become precise. Awakening ends the era of maybe. Maybe I'll change later. Maybe this isn't that serious. Maybe I don't really know yet. Those words stop working once awareness settles in. You don't get motivated after awakening. You get cornered by truth. You don't feel inspired. You feel exposed. Exposed to what you tolerate. Exposed to what you avoid. Exposed to the gap between what you know and what you live. That gap is unbearable once you see it clearly. This is why awakening feels heavy instead of euphoric. You are no longer protected by ignorance. You are no longer cushioned by confusion. You are no longer allowed to lie to yourself without consequence. Every choice carries weight now. Every delay feels intentional. Every compromise registers as self-betrayal. People who have not awakened mistake this for anxiety or depression. It is neither. It is finality beginning to set in. Awakening does not add meaning to life. It removes false meaning, and what remains feels stark at first, empty even. That emptiness is not loss. It is clearance. It is reality after illusion has been stripped away. Most people run from this stage. They rush to rebuild identities. They grab new beliefs. They adopt new labels and communities. Anything to avoid sitting in the quiet aftermath of collapse. Chosen ones do not rush. They endure the void. They understand that something must fully end before something real can stabilize. This is where loneliness peaks, not because no one is around, but because few people can meet you where illusion no longer exists. Conversations feel shallow, goals feel artificial, social games feel transparent. You are not superior. You are simply finished with pretending. This is why awakening is not contagious. It isolates before it integrates. You lose the ability to enjoy things that once distracted you. You lose patience for narratives that once soothed you. You lose tolerance for systems that depend on unconscious participation. That loss feels brutal, but it is honest. Awakening is the end of unconscious belonging. You no longer belong to crowds by default. You no longer inherit beliefs passively. You no longer move with the current without questioning where it leads. You must choose, and choosing collapses futures. That is why awakening is irreversible. You cannot unknow what you now see. You cannot re-enter illusions you clearly recognize. You cannot shrink back into comfort without feeling the cost. This is not punishment. It is alignment enforcing itself. Once awareness has reached a certain threshold, reality stops negotiating with you. You either live in coherence with what you know, or you suffer from the friction of resisting it. There is no third option. That is why chosen ones often experience radical simplification after awakening. Fewer relationships, fewer desires, fewer distractions. Not because life took something away, but because only what is real survives clarity. Everything else falls apart on its own. This is the truth most people never hear. Awakening does not make life magical. It makes life inevitable. You no longer wander. You converge. You no longer explore endlessly. You commit decisively. You no longer search for truth. You live with it. And truth does not negotiate. It demands consistency. It demands integrity. It demands action. That is why awakening feels like pressure closing in rather than freedom opening up. Freedom without responsibility is fantasy. Awakening replaces fantasy with consequence, and consequence is heavy, but consequence is also real. In time, something stabilizes, not excitement, not bliss, clarity, a quiet solidity. You stop asking who you are. You stop wondering where you're going. You stop needing permission, because there are no longer multiple lives competing inside you. There is one direction left, one reality that makes sense, one path that does not require self-betrayal. Everything else has collapsed. You did not find the truth. You ended the possibilities that could not survive it. That is why this path is narrow. That is why it is lonely. That is why it is irreversible. And that is why only those meant to carry finality are called to walk it. You are not the observer standing safely outside existence. You are the moment reality commits. And once it does, nothing remains undecided. That is the end. And that end is what makes your life real. You were never meant to watch life from a safe distance. You were never here to sample possibilities without consequence. You were never designed to drift. You didn't find the truth. You collapsed into it every time you chose clarity over comfort. Something ended. Every time you refused illusion, a version of your life died quietly. Every time you stayed conscious when it would have been easier to escape, reality committed. That is why this path feels irreversible. That is why going back feels impossible. That is why pretending no longer works. You are not broken. You are finished with ambiguity. The world does not feel heavier because you are weak. It feels heavier because it is no longer allowed to be vague around you. This is not awakening as an achievement. This is awakening as an ending. And endings do not celebrate themselves. They solidify. You are not here to observe the collapse of reality. You are the collapse. And once that happens, there is no return to possibility, only alignment, only consequence, only truth.